The hospital was unusually quiet that night. White lights reflected off nearly empty corridors. Dr. Alexander reviewed charts with mechanical focus. For him, patients were data, not mysteries. He trusted protocols more than people's prayers. Miracles had no place in his worldview. It felt like just another routine shift. Alexander had been an atheist for most of his life. He believed science explained everything that mattered. He had seen good people die without divine intervention. Faith, in his mind, was emotional self-defense. Numbers and machines never lied to him. Religion belonged outside the hospital walls. That belief had never been challenged before. One patient under his care was young and stable. Vitals were normal and monitors showed no alarms. Lab results offered no immediate concerns. Alexander signed the report with confidence. There was no indication of an imminent crisis. No reason to disturb the family with fear. Everything appeared fully under control. As he walked down the hallway, he heard murmurs. A family sat against the wall, whispering prayers. A mother clutched a rosary with trembling hands. She repeated a name over and over again. At first, Alexander ignored the sound, but the name echoed repeatedly in the corridor. Carlo Acutis. The doctor frowned with visible irritation. He believed faith only created false hope. In his view, religion confused vulnerable families. He chose to walk past without engaging. He didn't know that name would return soon, nor that it would follow him all night. His certainty remained untouched for now. Minutes later, something unexpected happened. An elderly man appeared at the end of the hall. He wore no badge, no uniform, no coat. His presence felt calm but strangely intentional. He walked straight toward Alexander without hesitation. The hospital noise seemed to fade around him. It was as if time slowed down. The man stopped directly in front of the doctor. He called Alexander by his full name. The doctor froze, startled by the familiarity. He was certain they had never met before. Alexander asked who he was and what he wanted. The man did not answer immediately. He simply looked at him, studying his face. Then the man spoke in a firm, steady voice. He mentioned the name Carlo Acutis again. Alexander felt a sudden wave of discomfort. He didn't understand why that name followed him. The man's tone was calm, not threatening, but it carried a sense of certainty, like someone stating an unavoidable fact. "Your patient will die tonight," the man said. The words hit like a sudden blow. Alexander reacted with disbelief and sarcasm. He defended his diagnosis without hesitation. There was no medical reason for such a claim. He assured the man there was no danger. The stranger did not argue back. Before leaving, the man gave one final warning. "Remember this hour," he said quietly. Alexander glanced at his watch instinctively. It read exactly 10:47 p.m. He smiled dismissively, almost amused. To him, the statement meant nothing. He had no idea that moment would define him. Alexander returned to the patient's room calmly. The monitors still showed stable, reassuring numbers. The young man slept peacefully, unaware of danger. Nothing had changed since the last examination. The doctor felt validated by what he saw. He convinced himself the stranger was delusional. The warning began to fade from his thoughts. The hospital grew quieter as the night deepened. Footsteps echoed faintly through distant corridors. Alexander poured himself a cup of strong coffee. He tried to focus on pending reports and notes, yet the sentence repeated in his mind, uninvited. "Tonight," it whispered over and over again. He shook his head and kept working. Shortly after 11, a nurse approached him. Her expression was tense and unusually cautious. She asked if the family could see the patient. Alexander answered with professional reassurance. He explained there was no reason for alarm. He advised her to keep the family calm, but he noticed fear in her eyes. From the hallway, the sound of prayer returned. The patient's mother wept quietly against the wall. The rosary slipped rapidly through her fingers. She whispered the same name again and again. Alexander felt irritation rise inside his chest. Faith, he believed, would change nothing. He walked away, pretending not to hear. As midnight approached, a monitor beeped softly. The sound was subtle, barely worth attention. Alexander stepped closer without concern. He adjusted a few settings mechanically. Minor fluctuations happened all the time. There was no reason to panic yet. He expected the numbers to stabilize, but the rhythm did not return to normal. The values began to drift downward slowly. Alexander narrowed his eyes, now more alert. He called a nurse to double-check the readings. They stood in silence, watching the screen. The room felt suddenly heavier. Something was starting to feel wrong. The doctor ordered additional tests immediately. His voice remained steady, trained, professional. Yet his thoughts were anything but calm. The stranger's words resurfaced unexpectedly. He forced himself to dismiss the memory. Coincidences happened, he told himself. Still, his heart beat faster. By 11:30 p.m., the situation worsened. The patient showed signs of sudden distress. Alarms sounded more frequently and sharply. The medical team was called to respond. Alexander took command without hesitation. Everything moved faster and more urgently. The atmosphere shifted from calm to tense. The family was escorted away from the room. The mother cried out in desperation. She called the name Carlo Acutis loudly. Her voice echoed through the corridor. Alexander heard it clearly from inside. For the first time, he couldn't ignore it. A chill ran through his body. The medical team gathered tightly around the bed. Machines began to sound more frequently and loudly. Vital signs dropped without a clear medical cause. Alexander issued orders with practiced urgency. Yet something inside him began to crack. He had never seen a decline this sudden. Not without warning signs. Interventions followed one after another quickly. Oxygen levels were adjusted and medications administered. Every step followed established medical protocol. Still, the patient's body failed to respond. It felt as if treatment met an invisible barrier. Alexander clenched his jaw in frustration. Control was slipping away. A sharp alarm cut through the room. The heart rhythm became dangerously unstable. The team exchanged silent, worried glances. No one said what everyone was thinking. Alexander felt cold sweat on his forehead. The stranger's words resurfaced with clarity. Tonight. The resuscitation protocol was initiated immediately. Hands moved with speed and trained precision. Each second stretched into unbearable length. The air in the room felt thick and heavy. Alexander glanced at the wall clock unwillingly. Time advanced without mercy. The warning no longer seemed ridiculous. Outside, the family prayed in desperation. The mother dropped to her knees in the hallway. She repeated Carlo Acutis' name through tears. Some staff members watched with compassion. Others avoided the scene altogether. Alexander heard everything from inside the room. His focus began to fracture. The patient's heart began to fail rapidly. The monitor line shook and wavered. Alarms sounded continuously without pause. Alexander shouted instructions with strained urgency. Yet he felt completely powerless. This level of helplessness was unfamiliar and deeply unsettling. For a brief moment, Alexander looked toward the door. He thought he saw a figure standing in the corridor, the same elderly silhouette from earlier. He blinked, assuming exhaustion was playing tricks. The doorway was empty and silent. Another alarm pulled him back to reality. Time was running out. Resuscitation efforts continued relentlessly. The medical team showed signs of exhaustion. The patient's breathing became erratic. Alexander felt a tight knot in his chest. Nothing in the tests explained this collapse. Medical logic had failed completely. Certainty was dissolving. A long, piercing tone filled the room. The monitor displayed a nearly flat line. Silence fell instantly over the team. Alexander slowly raised his hand. He ordered one final attempt, but deep down, he already knew. The end was approaching. The monitor released a long, continuous tone. The line straightened before everyone's eyes. The medical team froze in complete silence. Alexander felt the air leave his lungs. No one spoke for several long seconds. The moment felt heavier than any sound. Reality had settled in. A nurse finally broke the silence softly. She asked for the official time of death. Alexander lifted his eyes slowly and reluctantly. They went straight to the wall clock. Red digital numbers glowed with cruel clarity. It read exactly 12:47 a.m., the same hour he had been told. A hollow sensation spread through Alexander's chest. Every word spoken by the stranger returned vividly. He remembered his mockery and disbelief. Nothing in the patient's chart explained this outcome. There had been no warning signs at all. The prediction had unfolded perfectly, exactly as stated. Time of death, 12:47, he said quietly. His voice sounded unfamiliar even to himself. It was lower, slower, and deeply human. The team began disconnecting equipment in silence. No one spoke of effort or success. The room felt charged with something unnamed, something none of them could explain. Alexander stepped out of the room slowly. His legs felt weak and unsteady. The hallway stretched endlessly before him. Each step echoed loudly in his head. Never had a death shaken him like this. Never had a warning come true so precisely. Nothing felt the same anymore. The family was informed moments later. The mother collapsed, crying uncontrollably. Yet between sobs, she whispered gratitude. She said they had been prepared. They knew this night would be the last. Carlo Acutis had warned them, she said. Alexander listened without interrupting. Their response pierced him deeply. There was no anger in their voices, no accusations or bitterness toward the staff, only a strange, peaceful acceptance. He could not understand that kind of faith. He wondered where such calm came from. It dismantled him internally. The hospital priest approached him gently. He did not speak of punishment or blame. He simply said something extraordinary had happened, not something seen every day. Alexander offered no argument in return. For once, he had nothing to refute. He stood in silent reflection. For the first time in years, Alexander doubted. He questioned his absolute certainty in science. He questioned his rejection of the spiritual. Medicine still mattered deeply to him, but it no longer felt complete. Something beyond measurement existed, and he could not deny it. That night, Alexander did not return to work. He sat alone in a quiet room. The hour replayed endlessly in his mind. 12:47 burned into his memory. The warning had been fulfilled precisely, and with it, his old confidence died. Something new was beginning. The days that followed felt unfamiliar to Alexander. He returned to his duties, but something was different. He examined patients with a quieter presence. The certainty he once carried was gone. He no longer felt like the final authority. Every case reminded him of his limitations. The hour remained etched in his mind. He began listening more carefully to his patients. Their fears, hopes, and beliefs mattered now. He noticed how faith brought comfort to many. Before, he dismissed it without thought. Now, he observed it with respect. He no longer argued when God was mentioned. Silence became his response. One afternoon, Alexander returned to the chapel. This time, he entered with intention. He sat down slowly and took a deep breath. He wasn't searching for proof or answers. He simply wanted to understand. For the first time, he spoke softly. He wasn't sure anyone was listening. His words came out awkward and sincere. He admitted his pride and resistance. He confessed how certain he had been. The memory of the exact hour overwhelmed him. His throat tightened as emotions surfaced. Tears came without warning or control. He had reached the bottom. Over time, Alexander chose to change. He did not abandon medicine or science. Instead, he reshaped how he practiced it. Humility replaced arrogance. Listening became as important as diagnosing. He learned that healing wasn't always curing. Some wounds needed presence, not solutions. Eventually, he began sharing his story, not to force belief on anyone, but to warn others of human limits. He described the warning and its precision, the exact hour and the undeniable outcome. People listened in stunned silence. Many saw themselves in his doubt. Alexander never mocked faith again. He never claimed to have all answers. He remained a doctor with questions. But he no longer closed the door to mystery. He accepted that reality was bigger than logic. Denying it would not make it disappear. Humility became his foundation. Every time he sees a digital clock, he remembers. 1247 is no longer just a time. It marks the death of his arrogance and the birth of something honest and new, a harder path, but a truer one, where science and mystery coexist, without contempt or fear. Today, Alexander speaks with clarity. The greatest miracle was not the prediction, nor the terrifying accuracy of the hour. It was the transformation of his heart, a closed mind opened by reality, an unshakable certainty shattered, a life redirected. If you stayed until the end, it wasn't by chance. This story may be meant for you as well. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we share testimonies that challenge reason, stories many prefer not to tell, because the impossible is still happening today, sometimes with a name and an exact hour.